Hello and welcome to my review of the Oukitel U15 Pro. I've unboxed everything here just to show you exactly what you get included. I've also put the key specifications at the top of the screen for you. The spec on this one looks quite interesting. We've got an 8-core processor, we've got 3 gig of RAM and 32 gig of storage, so I'm expecting some good performance figures from this particular 5.5-inch handset. Now looking on the back of the box, you just get a basic overview of some of the specs. It's just running Android 6.0, this one, and the included user manual is fairly basic, enough to get you going if you haven't used a phone before. Now you get an included gel cover with this particular model, and it's not a bad fit at all, it's quite decent. Now I'm peeling off the protector that's included with it too. Now you can see the cutout areas for the fingerprint sensor on the back, the volume and power controls and the ports. Taking that off, you'll see there's a sort of warning label here which you can peel off about cutting down SIM cards. I've personally never had a problem myself, but just bear that in mind. And we'll move in a bit closer to look at the fingerprint sensor here. This particular section of the back is metal, and there's a camera at the top which is 16 megapixel. I think that's interpolated from 13, and on the sides we have the volume and power controls. These are quite nicely machined. At the top, a 3.5mm headphone jack, and this section is plastic so that the antenna can get the signal, and we have a 5 megapixel front camera, notification LED too. On the underside there is a single speaker grill, micro USB port and a microphone. At the bottom we have the navigation buttons. They're not backlit, but they're quite clear, silver effect. And looking at the screen, this is a 720p resolution for the 5.5-inch display, so it's an IPS panel, and it's actually pretty good. It's quite clear, good viewing angles, and not too reflective, a bit of reflection, but above average in that area. Now, just looking at the handset booted up here, going through some of the apps here, you can see they've used a sort of custom skin for this, but you can always use your own launcher if you wish. There's a couple of interesting features, including a power saving mode, where you can have various options to adjust a bit more than you'd normally expect. You also have a super long standby mode as well. Now this has the effect of creating a simplified display. This might be useful for people that don't particularly like the user interface on phones, as well as saving the battery power. If you go into the themes, you'll be able to pick a few that are already preloaded onto the phone. They're quite colourful. You'll see that the graphics on the preview is in Chinese, I believe. The good news is though that once you've actually applied the profile, it's in the native language of the phone. Obviously I've set this to English, so that's just the preview that shows the foreign language. They haven't overloaded the phone with tons of apps, which is quite good to see. Some makers tend to put a few too many in there. Running into the main menus now, it's very much the same as you'd expect for an Android 6.0 phone. Now if we scroll down to the display, we have the adaptive brightness, which is I usually use. That works quite well for me. And we also have a selection of gesture motions. Now, another strange point of this was the notification LED. There wasn't any settings for it. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but there is a notification LED at the top there. Whether or not it's hidden away somewhere, I couldn't find it myself. You have some gesture settings as well. Now, I tend to not use too many of these, perhaps the double tap to unlock the screen, but you can scroll through and pick the specific app that you want to launch. The included storage capacity is quite high, so it's entirely possible if you use both SIMs at the same time that you won't have a problem there, because you'll be able to put quite a few apps and pictures and video clips on there. Now I'm looking at the fingerprint scanner now and sensor. Now when you boot this up, you'll be offered a choice to do it, or you can do it later on. I'm adding a finger here now to the settings. Now you just tap and move around the finger, get different angles. I find it works quite well if you position it around at different settings, so that you'll be able to read the fingerprint more accurately. And it's a significant improvement over the earlier fingerprint scanners that I've used. It unlocks almost all of the time and very quickly, so I have no complaints at all on that sort of things. Opening up the SIM tray with the included tool, it's a bit different from previous ones that I've looked at. This one has a back plate, perhaps that's why they mentioned about cutting down SIM cards. and for this I've fitted a SIM card and the micro SD card. Now if you're using the micro SD, you'll only be able to use one SIM with this, and if you have a nano you'll want to use an adapter to make it larger. Now the charging speed on this was about 0.3 amps, so about 3.5 hours just under for a full charge, and you have a charging indicator LED too, so that turns from red to green when it's finished. You also have a notification LED as well. You'll see it flashing blue here to let me know that I've had an email. The Wi-Fi speeds were good. This is the same as I've used for my Android box, tested same distance, and I'm getting a good download speed and upload speed. I'm running some benchmarks now to get an idea of the actual performance of the handset, and we've got a very good score for Antutu. It's over 40,000, so this is a good mid-range score for a handset in this particular price range. Definitely one of the better ones that I've used. On to Geekbench now. We'll run that. This is purely a processor benchmark. We get a single core 614 and a multi-core of 2646. Again, that's definitely above average for a handset in this price range. We've got the 8-core MediaTek processor with this, and it's doing a pretty good job on that. So I'm quite happy with the performance on that, and it feels pretty speedy using the handset in day-to-day use. That's probably helped with the additional memory as well. 3 gig of RAM is quite a lot. Now I'm just comparing it to other handsets. Obviously we don't expect it to match Samsung Galaxy 7 Note, but it's down at a level which would be quite respectable. There's a OnePlus 2, it's pretty similar to that, it's almost identical, and it's quite a bit faster than some of the older flagship handsets as well. This is a benchmark that tests the 3D. You can see the frame rate at the top there in the right, and the frame rates are already much higher than the Android boxes that I've tested. We get an average frames per second of 46.8, so that's a really good score for this handset on 3D graphics performance. This quickly shows you the brightness adjustment of the screen, and you can see it can dim right down to a really low level. The camera can barely see it, but I can just about. Unfortunately, there's no gyro sensor with this, so you won't be able to use it with Cardboard or the VR apps. This just brings down the pull down notification menu. Now outside I tested the handset for GPS, and the accuracy was good. I got down to about 3 feet, so I've no complaints on that side of things. Looking at some pictures, this was an indoor shot I took with flash. You see it can be a bit noisy. It does tend to ramp up the ISO levels. Here's a quick shot of a cat inside. The camera is best described as average or mediocre. You can use the particular choice of term that you want. Outside I found the dynamic range could be a bit limited. You can see the white cat here, and the background's a bit underexposed. One of the weaker points that I found was that the lens could be prone to a bit of flare. You'll see it here on the left hand side. You can cover that with your hand, but that's something to watch out for. It didn't do a bad job for close-up shots though, and it does have digital image stabilization, which helps. It is interpolated, so there isn't really any advantage in using the higher resolutions. So for me the main weakness there is the dynamic range and potentially lens flare. It's passable for a camera in this price range. Now for the next test I'm just doing some quick video footage just to show you how the performance is for that with the digital image stabilization on, and that works reasonably well. It does help create a more steadier footage. You will see that it does crop in with that on though, so that's something you should bear in mind. I'm now showing you a clip with the IS on. You see it's cropped there quite a bit, and once you see it off you will see a wider image. But obviously you're going to pick up more minor shakes. The video quality isn't bad, it shoots full HD. The front camera is also reasonably good as well. It's good enough to do Skype and things like that and take the odd selfie. So summing up with this handset, the U15 Pro, the negatives I've already mentioned. The camera is fairly basic, it's not too bad. I've seen better and I've seen worse, but it's nothing to really shout about either. The dynamic range can be a bit limited and the lens flare could be an issue. If you're not spending too much money on a camera, you need to buy a Lumia handset if you want a good camera. They're the only handsets that I've used at this price point that are actually any good. Leaving that aside, the performance was excellent. The build was also very nice. I found that the metal back was comfortable in the hand and it had a good solid feel to it with the curved glass on the front as well. The additional storage and RAM also helps with performance. Certainly if you're a budget gamer or something like that, you don't want to spend too much money, this does a really nice job for that, and the screen is quite clear and legible too, and the battery life is also above average for a handset at this price as well. You'll have no problems getting a couple of days usage out of it. So overall, mostly positive on this if you can overlook the camera side of things.